Welcome back, everyone. All right. So first things first is that this is one helmet. What you can do is, if you're really into this kind of stuff, you can model, 5 or 10 of these, and you'll get really good at this. Now, of course, this is just one example of this, but I could end up making a few more, especially the ones with the feathers and whatnot. So here is a good example. Now, remember, we do have this modifier here, and it's a mirror modifier. And if we tab out into object mode, right? You can see that it's one object here, but when we tab into edit mode, this is still just half. Like, if you can imagine, a line along this blue line, everything to the left is one object and the other is just kind of generated, okay? There's another thing we can do, and the one thing that most people tend to ask me about, and a lot of the questions I get, it has to do with subdivision service, and it has to do with how all these tutorials are made. So actually, I'm just going to click outside here, and if you add a modifier, or if you actually select all by pushing A, and you add a modifier, and we'll do a subdivision surface modifier, you can see that that changes it up quite a bit, but it does add quite a bit more it adds quite a bit more definition to it. And the cool thing is that let's say I decide to take this vertice here and move it down. The mirror modifier works with the subdivision modifier. Okay. Now let's just go and let's undo that for a second, because I was pretty happy with what I had before. Now you can go ahead and you can click this view again, and you can actually put the subdivision surface here. And this, if you look into it, there's a lot of faces in there. And if you're into really smooth stuff here, remember when you make something smooth, you're not actually, it's not like in Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop where you take a Bezier curve and just make a curve. You actually have to make more faces to do it. So I use the subdivision surface modifier, very, very scarce. And if I tab out of this here, you can see that there's quite a bit more faces here. And if I add in more, right, you can see that that gets quite smooth. And the thing is that if we were to apply this, this would be horrendously a horrendously large amount of faces, like a whole video game character like for the Xbox One or PlayStation 3 would have this many vertices. You would never put this in a game. But if you were making a movie, you'd probably have to do it something like this, okay? So that's what subdivision surface modifiers do, and I know I talk about this a lot, and if I'm making something that requires this level of detail, and specifically this amount of curves, then then I can go ahead and add it in there. Most of the time though, I don't need to, and this is actually good enough here. Now, you can make the impression that if you were to render this in a game, most people aren't going to notice. And on that note, if you were to texture this in a certain way, you wouldn't even see that. I know it looks really blocky to probably a lot of you here, but a lot of people are going to look at that. Having said that, if we were to go ahead and put that subdivision surface on here, and we were to apply it, so if we just apply that here, and of course they can't be in editor mode, right? So if we go ahead and we apply it here, this would probably be the most that you would want to do in for a video game, okay? And the reason is it's too much here, and we're just going to go and put that in here, and you can actually have quite a bit of fun with this. Probably some of the more AAA games, if there's not a lot of vertices in the scene, might do this here. Again, I like to err on the side of caution, so I'm just going to undo this actually to that here. So there we go. We leave it at this. Go ahead, and of course, none of this is if you've been following along, one thing you definitely want to do is do as many of these helmets as you can. Anything that you do, if you do something like 10 or 20, and for the most part, you can go ahead and you can make as detailed as you want. A lot of the people who do this for a living will spend 30 hours on a helmet like this. And if you're wondering why anyone would ever want to do that, it's actually quite simple. When you see a movie or a video game, all of those hours of just tweaking and playing around actually do make a difference, and that's why these video games, at least AAA games and movies, cost so much, is because you got a whole bunch of people tinkering for perfection. And being a creative person, I would have to tell you that not everyone knows about that, but that's just the way it is. And of course, I could tweak this forever. In fact, like this vertice is a little out of place. I could just bring it out just a little bit more, right? There we go. And I could tweak this for maybe a few more hours if I really wanted to and make a really cool helmet. All right. So that's how you make a simple helmet. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.